All right, thank you, Joe. I'm gonna read it, okay?
Good evening, Tim.
Just take the disclaimer.
A minute early, so always great to have Cantor Shifman with us and for the next few weeks as well. So next week, bring more people.
Don't have the same value as a sisterhood, otherwise.
Well, some of the sisterhood people might join. Might have influx.
I can actually say I wasn't in this discussion.
Wasn't my decision. Either.
Everyone, let's discuss tonight. So we're transitioning, as I said, from each and every class. Nice to see the same faces. It means we're not scaring you away, which. But each and every class is a class unto itself. There's really no continuum. They're like separate ideas. There may be some shared ideas that we see that apply to the same ritual, even though it's a different item. But in itself, it's a different idea. So tonight I wanted to focus on something that we're all familiar in some degree, and that is mezuzah. And I want to get into some of the actual laws of mezuzah and some of the rituals and some of the protections that our rabbis speak highly about for the mezuzah. And hopefully, I want to hear by next week that somebody, by the time we get done, someone went out and bought a mezuzah for their home or more. Or one or more, okay? Now, for full disclosure, that's not what I'm doing on the side. I don't sell mezuzah. But my job is to try to convince you to get them, okay? All right.
That's selling, that's marketing.
Yeah, it's marketing, but I don't actually have, it's not.
Hey,
The benefit.
here's the guy.
Okay, so the question is, why do we do mezuzah? First and foremost, so we're going to establish that right off the top. And I'm sure all of you are familiar, a prayer that's said multiple times a day, Shema. So both paragraphs of the Shema, not just first paragraph. Paragraph number 1. So if you come to the daily minyan, then I'll keep on plugging. Daily minyan at 7:15, somewhere a little bit later on. Bob can probably give you to the minute what time to do Shema here.
7:20. Make sure we start at 7:15.
But the first paragraph of the Shema, which they sing here, is the last line, which is in Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 9. You'll go through the Shema. Last line, it talks about phylacteries in there, talks about loving God, but then the last it said, Uchtav tam. You should write them upon your doorpost and affix them. First paragraph of the Shema. Later on in Deuteronomy, again, a little bit of a different idea. It talks about how God will bless us. And then unfortunately, the blessings aren't always there if we don't fulfill the mandates of the Torah. In other words, we get famine and all kind of other things. But that end of the paragraph again ends with, yet again, phylacteries and you should affix them to your doorposts. So we know the how and now let's go into the actual how we do it, and then we're going to get into what's in it. So what constitutes a door that requires a mezuzah?
Every door.
Not necessarily.
The bathrooms and,
Bathrooms, toilets,
right.
but the door has to be more than 3 feet high. That's a starting point. Okay, door has to, so a little mini door, and that's going to be relevant for a discussion because I'm going to give you some hypotheticals tonight. I'm sure if you're a sleeper like me, you toss and you turn and you think of all kind of ideas. Let's say hypothetically, unfortunately, you hear about this all the time. Let's say somebody is kind of homeless and he lives in his car. So the commandment is to put a mezuzah in your dwelling. But that's his dwelling or her dwelling. So do you need a mezuzah in your car door? The answer is no.
No.
Now, if you have an RV, which we're gonna speak about, an RV, like Dr. Sid Cohen, I don't see him on tonight, but I know he used to have one. And the RV, the doorpost is more than 3 feet high, and you dwell in it and you travel around in it. Then you have to put a mezuzah on there. Okay, so now to Norm's point, every door except now, if you have a closet,
No closets, you don't have.
if you have a closet like the his and hers, which was bigger than some people's apartments and houses, and if it's more than 6.5 by 6.5, you need to have a mezuzah. That's just the rules, okay? I don't make them up, I'm just telling you what's prescribed, okay? But definitely bathing areas and other areas like that, we'll speak a little bit about. Now, what is the net effect of the mezuzah itself, the benefit? So when you affix it to the door, you put it on, if you remember, we spoke about the right and the left side a little bit. This is one of those that go on the right side. Upon entrance, a third to the top of the doorpost, not lower, a third up, like the third up. And it's supposed to be done on a slant. The rabbis were in a disagreement. Should it be horizontal? Should it be vertical? They couldn't come to an agreement.
Halfway.
And one of the few times that you have two Jews in a room that come to a consensus, let's compromise. So they said, we're gonna put it on a slant. One be horizontal, one be vertical, so everybody's a winner. At least to some degree. Maybe they didn't feel it at the end. So the mezuzah is put on a slant. You will see on the mezuzah itself, there's God's name written on the outside. We'll speak about that momentarily. Now, I want to go, we've given you the how and why of the mezuzah already. Now, there's actually another reference to the mezuzah itself in Exodus. So we didn't come to, not too long ago that we've wrapped up Passover. So the night of the Paschal Lamb, where God was actually going to punish all of the firstborns, remember, the last plague, the Jews have like blood put on the doorposts. That's actually called, what color was Napoleon's white horse? That's mezuzah. That's the idea of the cloth, okay? That's a mezuzah. The doorposts are a mezuzah. The top of it has a fancy name called a lentil, okay? The very top of it. So you got the doorposts, and the Jews had like blood on the doorposts, and God and the angels passed over, right? That's the whole concept of Pesach, Passover. Passover means literally they pass by. So the rabbis learned from there that there has to be, we're going to bring another case in the Talmud, protections. With the term mezuzah, with the word mezuzah and something on the doorpost, that there's protections because the Jews were protected from whatever happened to that night. So that's another reference to not exactly why we do mezuzah. We have the two sources in the book of Deuteronomy, but that deals specifically with the Passover and the protections involved. Now, why specifically the prayer of Shema? Now, why we like to call ourselves flexible, there's no gray area in terms of having more than one God. So if you don't accept that there's only one God, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, it's a non-starter. Which is why if you note, what is one of the first prayers you'll teach a child? From the get-go.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's bookends. And I've done this unfortunately in my career many times where I've had to go into hospice and we get the call and they're basically saying it's a matter of hours. Very short time frame when the individual has left and we say Shema with them again. The Shema is done at the beginning, outset of a person's life and at the end. We also say Shema when we go to bed at night. Every night, Shema on the Shema Lamita. Why do we do Shema at night? It's maybe you're going to say because we miss the evening prayers. Why do we do Shema at night before we go to sleep?
Because we want to wake up in the morning.
Say that again?
We want to wake up in the morning.
Well, we want to make up, but there's no guarantee you will wake up.
Right, in case you don't.
So in case you don't,
Ah,
then you go to bed with a confessional, which what we say, there's a whole text actually where there is a confessional. You know, we do lightly in the high holidays where you get some bruising to show afterwards. Asham nu bagad nu, we hit ourselves, right? Over and over. But there's actually confessional in this nighttime prayer that we do every night in the event. And we hear it all the time. And what a beautiful way to go if a person has to, God forbid, without the suffering that they go into sleep. Incidentally, as a side note, and I can't tell you how they came up with this formula, the rabbis tell us in the Talmud, sleep is 1/60th of death. I can't explain that. I don't know how they came to that. 1/60th, okay? Can't tell you why that is. That's a reason, by the way, when you wake up from your sleep, you wash your hands. Same reason when you leave a cemetery. Well, it's like you come in contact with the death.
Yeah.
We're told that the soul leaves the body and goes up at night. So some kind of an ascension going on, and then it comes back into the body. Okay. The Rambam Maimonides says part of the commandment of the mezuzah is every time you come into your home, whichever entrance you use, and hopefully there's a mezuzah on that entrance, that you understand that nothing lasts forever, including the mezuzah, which is why a mezuzah has to be checked twice every 7 years. Every 3.5 years. I recently had mine done on Taylor Road, and the rabbi who's an expert in the area, the title is a sofer. Just like you have doctors that specialize, you have rabbis that specialize. He's called a sofer, he's a scribe. Due to air-conditioned and heating environments now, mezuzahs actually don't corrupt as fast as they used to. Now, that's not for outdoor mezuzahs. Outdoors, they still deal with the elements. But in your home, you have 70 degrees or whatever you have your house at. The mezuzah is going to, as opposed to what they used to have yesteryear, mezuzahs actually would show some corrosion. We'll speak about what constitutes the actual mezuzah. Now, there are 22 lines in a mezuzah. It's written on one piece of parchment, one piece. And the 22 lines correspond to the 22 letters in the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. Now, what should happen when humidity gets into a mezuzah or other factors? As you know, the scribe writes with a feather and special ink. What happens is that the ink will sometimes rise to the surface and eventually crack. Now, the problem is when ink cracks, is the letters take on a different form. You know how there's one of the common letters, anyone that's ever taught bar bat mitzvah, ever read from the Torah, or davened, I know many of you do, and you say certain letters look alike, right? So like the Zayin, the Dalet and the Resh, for example. So you know, like the Dalet has a hangover, goes all the way across and it comes up. If it loses the base, then all of a sudden it takes on like a Resh. The problem is then the entirety of the words change and the meaning changes. And I would say this to the bar bat mitzvah kids all the time. And some of you, I see some of my former bar bat mitzvah class students back there, two of them sitting together. But it's so close. And I was just having this discussion with Kenny the other day where something is close, you know, it's not, something has to be exact. Close enough is when you play horseshoes or, God forbid, you throw a hand grenade. It doesn't have to be precise, you know. Golf, not quite. You still got to get it in the hole, Joe. So, depending how lenient your group is, on the other hand. Let me rephrase that. If you got a group that gives you a 10-foot putt, then you're okay. But by the letter of the law, you gotta finish out. Now, you cannot add to the mezuzah. In other words, let's say somebody likes. We're going to speak about what the protections are. You cannot add. Let's say you want to say, I've got a surplus of mezuzahs like this man has here. Says, I'm going to take home, I'm going to put two on the right side and the left side. It's forbidden. There's something called Baal Tosef. In other words, let's say you have 4 fringes on your talus. So, you know, I feel really good. I'd like to add 6. Or you put the tefillin on, right? And you say, put one on the right hand, one on the left hand. You cannot add to the mitzvah, you can't add letters, you gotta do the commandment as prescribed. Now, on the door, on the actual outside of the mezuzah, so once God's name is written in the Shema, both paragraphs, it's rolled up. And they use like a saran wrap to protect the mezuzah. But on the very flip side, they flip over the mezuzah. And there's God's name written. The God's name that's written on the outside is Shaddai. Shin, Daled, Yud, one of many God's names. Shaddai is an acronym for Shomer Elatot Yisrael, which means God guards the doorposts of Israel. That's what Shaddai is an acronym for. Yes, sir.
What if you have a double door on your front door?
You still got to the right side.
So just on the one side then?
Yeah, but it's not the door you're putting it at. You're putting it on the frame.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can still go on the right side, the right door. So you're supposed to see God's name, and you can see it on the outside depending on what kind of casing. No. Do you have to have a case? By the letter of the law, you don't. So on that note, I wanted to share a cute joke I heard many years ago, and then I'm going to share one. Shara was very nice to print up one. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm sure it's, if she's given me the approval, I'm sure it's very good. So there was a congregant that had a very good rapport with his rabbi. And rabbi was a centerfold in the family. He was at all the life cycles, baby namings and brisses and consecration and bar and bat mitzvahs and confirmation and even weddings and unfortunately even funerals. He has an opportunity to travel to Israel and he says, I want to do something special for my rabbi. I know in my mind, he's a holy man. I want to bring him something special back from Israel. And he decides, I'm going to bring him a mezuzah. So he's very excited. He has a great time on his trip. He comes back. He can't wait to show the rabbi and tell him about his trip. And he goes to the minyan, they daven, and he asks the rabbi if he can meet with him for a few minutes after. And the rabbi says, sure. And he tells him all about all the exciting places. He went all over Israel and how amazing it was. And then he said, on behalf of our family and me personally, I picked up something which I think you're really going to enjoy, has a good value. It's a mezuzah. And the rabbi says, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much. So he bids him a good day. Then the rabbi's got a little time on his hand. And he looks at this beautiful case, but the rabbi understands what's inside is more important than what's on the outside. So he goes to open it up and there's nothing inside. So he shakes it, he takes another look, he maybe figures it's not, something's not right with his eyes. Absolutely nothing in there, just this beautiful case. So he calls up his congregant and he says, I really appreciate this beautiful gift. But what happened to, that parchment, the paper that was inside? He said, Rabbi, I felt that you're such a knowledgeable guy and you know about everything that you don't need any directions. I threw him away. No, it's a cute joke, but I want to tell you in truth, one of the problems people have when they go to Israel is they think of it in terms of the Holy Land, that everything there is good to go, and they're tourist traps. And I've heard stories, I don't know if many of you remember, Zahava want to remember this. There's a chewing gum in Israel called bazooka.
Oh, yeah.
You ever have the old bazooka where they have like the comic strips? There's a joke about Moti and there's a little comic strip inside. People have opened mezuzahs to find the comic strips inside. They thought they were buying it from a reputable place. Some have found just a little piece of newspaper. So you've got to know.
Separate sales.
What's that?
Generally, they're two separate sales.
Well, when they buy, they're under that's in good faith that they want to know that everything's all included. Yes, it should be a separate sale. So if for full disclosure, the jeweler or whoever's selling it, whatever area it is, should say, here's a case, and you need the parchment to go inside of the casing. By full disclosure, that's what you should say.
They don't say that though.
Right? They don't say that. So they don't. So there's this assumption, and it's, by the way, it's the same thing in dietary laws. If you go to Israel, then everything has to be kosher. So once you get out of Jerusalem, it's not the case.
Yeah.
You go to some more of the remote cities, or even Tel Aviv, you have to be very careful. There are many places. You go to Shuk Carmel in Tel Aviv, which is like the Shuk in Jerusalem. Restaurant after restaurant, but many of them don't even have a certification. So just because you're in Israel, you still need to know and find a reputable source. Okay, now there was a story told in the Talmud about a Roman governor around the 2nd or 3rd century, and he was very good friends with the lead sage of the century. The lead sage was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the one that was involved with the compilation of the Mishnah. And he gave him this beautiful gem, beautiful, expensive stone. And Yehuda Nasi wanted to give him something back. So he gives him a mezuzah. So this governor is very put out. He says, I spent all this giving one of this beautiful piece of jewelry, and he gives me this little piece of parchment. What is this? So he calls him out. He says, with all due respect, I thought you were going to give me something nicer than this. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi tells him, the gift that you gave me, I have to have people to watch it around my house so it doesn't get stolen. The gift I gave you will protect your house. And later on, the story is told that this governor's daughter, got very sick, and none of the physicians could cure the daughter. And he remembers about what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, and he takes a mezuzah and he put it on her doorpost, and immediately she got healed. And I'm going to give you a number of testimonials tonight, story after story, of situational things like this, where the power of mezuzah is incredibly amazing.
Excuse me, those are what, 20% more though?
Those are 20%. Another cute joke I heard, because you always got to find some light things, levity, but use them for teaching. There were two good friends, and one was Jewish and one was not Jewish. And they were in the same line of business. Even though the non-Jew lived in a very Jewish area, they sold the same product, but the Jew was so much more successful. And his friend didn't understand. He says, I'm a friendly guy. My product is almost the same as yours. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I mean, why is it you're so much more successful than me? What is your secret? So the Jew says, without blinking an eyelid, he said, maybe if you get a mezuzah, it will help you in your business deal. So there's this Judaica store in town. Tell him you want the case and the cloth, the parchment. He tells him to ask for both of them, and put it in by your front door, and you should see a major change. So his friend is very excited, and he's seen them because in the neighborhood that he lives, a lot of Jews are living there. So he puts it up. Within 1 week, he calls his friend, and he's really angry. He says, what's the matter? He says, well, I called you up to increase my business, not lose business. He says, well, what do you mean? He says, ever since I put that scroll at the front door, I can't even pronounce it. These guys are standing there with his long black coats and beards and hats and a letter, and they're asking me for money. So to be taken in all seriousness, the mezuzah is a very worthwhile investment. There's story after story, as I said, of the doorposts and God's ability to actually will actually guard. And I'm going to do some of those stories with you momentarily. As I mentioned before, the mezuzah has to be approximately the doorpost, at least at the door, 3 feet high. And that constitutes for the mezuzah. Now, what constitutes a permanent dwelling? We need to know this so we can put a mezuzah. So Israel is different than the diaspora. So you may notice you go to Israel and you stay at some of the hotels. What do you notice having the doors? Mezuzah. By the letter of the law, not everybody follows this, but already one day in Israel, you could be required to put up a mezuzah already. So the hotels all have them. In the diaspora, minimum of 30 days. So Sabrina, she's on high. She surprised us for our anniversary this year. We went on a cruise. And you meet all kind of interesting people on a cruise. So we're talking to many people, and some people have been on 5 weeks in a row, 6 weeks. And then you find out that some cruises that go 6 months, some go a year, and some people actually do it for they figured out that it's cheaper to live on the boat and they get to see all kind of interesting places. So if you live in a boat, for example, or you have your own personal boat and you're traveling for any extended time, you have to have a mezuzah. Same for an RV. Now, an interesting question becomes, God forbid it shouldn't be anyone in this room, even though I know some good attorneys that could help out. What should happen if somebody's incarcerated and in jail? They think of everything, the rabbis. You know? It's not my brilliant idea, it's what they thought. What if somebody's in jail? Do they need a mezuzah?
Probably based on the term you're gonna be there.
Well, most are exactly right. So if you're there for any long length of a term, there's a whole discussion amongst the rabbis if you require a mezuzah. And then some say you do require, but you don't make a blessing because there's no blessing coming the fact that you're incarcerated. So how can a person be happy? The idea of the mezuzah, one sec, Yossi, is to look upon the mezuzah and see God's name and then think what that means. So for example, when you see God's name, you say, God owns everything, including the house I'm about to walk in. Now, there is a custom amongst Orthodox Jews. They knock on their own doors. And that's to show that they're not in charge. And it's not just the husband, it's the wives also. Because you say, well, of course, the wife's at home. Wife's gonna say, come on in, you're right. So we know we all adhere to what our wives tell us. But even the wives to knock on the door just to show that we're not in charge, God is in charge of everything, and we have blessings. Go ahead, Yossi, you had a
I
question.
was just gonna make a comment. It depends what kind of jail, white collar jail or maximum security.
No. Any kind of a jail, even if you got Wi-Fi and cable and a TV and a comfortable bed, God forbid, if you're living somewhere, now a tent, for example, is not high enough. So a camper wouldn't qualify.
Neither is a sukkah.
So a sukkah because 8 days,
That's it.
right? Now, here's a question I want to just, something that all of you will relate to. So you see a mezuzah, you come in, and instinctively, you kiss it. So what's that about? Now, this synagogue, I know you see some of your long-lost friends, everybody's it's a kissing congregation, but why do kiss a mezuzah? So it's a very interesting story about one of the commentators. If you look at a Chumash, I don't think the Eitz Chaim has it, but if you look at a more of one of the older Chumashim, you have two commentators, primary commentators. One is Rashi, the French sage that lives in the 10th and 11th century. And then another one is Onkelos. Onkelos was a convert, a nephew of the emperor of Rome. And a very interesting story about him in that he converted and he stayed in Israel, and they were very upset about it in Rome. So they sent a legion to go talk to him and bring him back. So the first group that comes to him, he was a pretty good salesman, and he also believed strongly in his Jewish belief. And he starts talking to them, and he converts them. They don't come back. They failed the mission. Not from his standpoint. From his standpoint, very successful mission. He brought some more people into the fold. So they send out another group. And he tries to engage them, and whatever he can engage them with, he knows enough to bring things to their attention, to show fallacy within their own religion, and to sway them. Finally, they send like a very strong group, and they're given an instruction. Do not allow him to talk to you. Shackle him and put him out. So they come to his house, the third group, and they come in, and he's smiling. And as he's about to leave, he puts his hand up on the mezuzah and he kisses. That's a source cited in the Talmud. And they're like, look at him like, what is that? So already they're in trouble. Right? It's got their attention. Starts explaining about the mezuzah and then the protections. And amazingly enough, the Talmud says he convinced them, A, to leave him alone, but they converted them also. So that is one of the primary sources of actually touching and kissing the mezuzah. Now, mezuzah and tefillin, as I mentioned, are in both paragraphs of the Shema, which you'll find in the actual casing, inside of the casing. So mezuzah is done on the right side. We mentioned last week, sorry, Mr. Goodstein, on the left side is the tefillin. And they're supposed to be like a barrier, protective barrier for all individuals. Now, just one more note is that Onkelos was so great, the sage, that he became the primary commentary in Aramaic to this day. There is a commandment, a rabbinic commandment, that you're to do the portion of the week twice in totality, not a triennial cycle, sorry. Twice in totality with one commentary. And you can choose who the commentary is. It can be either Rashi or it can be Onkelos. The problem is most of us that read Aramaic have no idea what we're saying, but you still get bonus points for just reading it.
Evan,
Yes, sir.
serious question now. Do you have to read it?
The other one before wasn't serious?
You need to really kiss the mezuzah with your finger. When you kiss the Torah, you don't use it with your bare hands. You use tzitzis or.
Well, that's because you're not allowed to touch the parchment directly, right? There's skins, there's oils on your skin in your hands. We don't want to smudge the letters. Mezuzah, however, almost all of them have casings on. Now, there's a number of people that don't love this custom. I heard a very cute, I don't know if you ever heard of a Rabbi Twersky. A very brilliant, he's a doctor and a rabbi, a very brilliant guy. And he says, it's an amazing thing. People come into their homes, they kiss the mezuzah and they sit down and watch TV for 2 hours. He says, I would rather have them kiss the TV and stare at the mezuzah for 2 hours. You go like from such a holy act, one hand you're there and the next thing, it's like you go to a mindless program, which is entertainment. We all need it. Sometimes it's educational, but most of the time, or it riles you up, depending, I'm not gonna get into politics tonight, but you come going for doing a holy act. So the Arizal says, he says to touch it like with your middle finger and kiss. There are some people you'll see, the Sephardim have a very interesting custom, is they'll blow a kiss to the mezuzah. They don't touch it. So there's also sanitary reasons. Can you imagine every time somebody, right? Like some people touch then kiss or kiss then touch. They're putting all those germs on the mezuzah. So they've got a custom where they just blow a kiss towards the general direction of a mezuzah. Now, I want to tell you, within the word mezuzah, you can play around. The rabbis are very creative what you can do with letters and numerology. Within the mezuzah, you have a double zayin, which means zaz, to move. And you can take the other remaining letters and you get mavet. So zaz mavet means you move aside death. Okay, so that's one of the blessings you have about putting a mezuzah on the home, because once again, it is a protective barrier. Another interpretation of zav mavet, a person can be figuratively dead, and by that I mean is kind of not doing anything with his life. You're kind of just going through the motions. You're not doing anything. So zaz mavet is a way to enhance a person and elevate them to something holy. Now, a young boy was playing very quietly by himself and really not in character. His mom looked at him and she said he's being awfully quiet. He's a rambunctious kid, And she said, are you okay? He said, yeah. Just come over here a second. So she touches his head and he's got a low-grade fever. She can feel it's warm already, almost 100 degrees. So she gives him a little Motrin and, she doesn't overreact. This goes on for over a week. So then she goes and she takes him to the pediatrician and nothing's changing. And We don't know what's going on. So he starts to do a little blood work. And so basically, I think it just got a virus. Right? That's what we told most of the time. When they don't have an answer, you got a virus. Let him stay home, take it easy. Another week goes by. Same symptoms, nothing's gone away. So she goes to a pediatric specialist now. And basically, let's do some more tests. Let's start testing for other things. And she's nervous now. She goes to this doctor and he says, I cannot do all of the testing here. Some of it has to be done at the hospital. So she and her husband are very nervous. And one of the old Jewish customs is when somebody's got a black cloud over them, one of the first things you do is check your mezuzahs. That's a known custom. Her and her husband almost said it simultaneously. Specifically, they check the mezuzah that is on his door, and they find two words, believe it or not, and the two words that are corrupted say sick child. Immediately, they go to the local scribe. They get a brand new mezuzah. The scribe put it back on his door. In the morning, is back to his rambunctious self, popping around. She calls a doctor. These are all documented stories, by the way. Goes to the doctor, calls him up and says, you want to look at my son? You can look at x-rays, but back to himself, there's no more fever. Once again, these are all documented. Just for a commercial break, I wanted to share something where Shar took the time to print here, okay?
Pretty similar to the other.
All right. Is it similar to what I said?
Yeah.
All right, that's a little bit of a twist on it, okay? A wealthy Jewish man buys a fabulous home in Beverly Hills. He brings in a local workman to decorate the place. When the job is finished, the homeowner is delighted, but realizes that he's forgotten to put mezuzahs on the doors. He goes out and he buys 50 mezuzahs and asks the decorator to place them on the right side of each door except for bathrooms and kitchens. He's really worried that the decorator would chip the paintwork, or won't put them up correctly. However, he comes back a few hours later and he sees the job has been carried out to his complete satisfaction. He's so pleased that he gives the decorator a bonus. As the decorator is walking out the door, he says, glad you're happy with the job. By the way, I took out all the warranties in those little boxes and left them on the table. Very good. So it's a very similar idea. Thank you, Sean. All right, very good. Same idea. All right, but very good. My uncle, blessed memory, was a scribe, and he would tell me, so the smaller the mezuzah, the more careful. Are there any extra chairs here? I don't know. There's some back here. Hi, Bob. And he would tell me the way you could check the difference between the cloth, the parchment and paper, is to put like a little flame to the corner. Paper lights immediately and the parchment doesn't. So they can write mezuzahs on computers, which obviously is not kosher. No matter how good the printer, no matter how good the AI you have, doesn't matter. It has to be done by hand. So you got to be truly careful. Now, interesting to note is the mezuzah acts like a silent witness. If you have a mezuzah in an institution or in your home that you've kept for many years, you think about, let's say like a mezuzah here, and we can ask some of our historians, are there any mezuzahs in this building from the old building? Ronnie Moskowitz, are there any mezuzahs in this building from Heights Temple? You don't know? Okay.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
All right. So many times you'll find when there's a merger or people move, they bring it with them. When you think about, even though it's a mezuzah, this thing has been on a doorpost for years and years. People coming and going, people passing away, different changes of leadership, clergy, buildings. It's the same mezuzah. So mezuzah acts as a testimonial to our history, metaphorically speaking, our own personal lives. Now, Moses had a first cousin. I'm going to switch to a story in the Torah, who was not happy with the hierarchy. Moses was a Levite. His cousin obviously was a Levite. And he accuses Moses of nepotism. You're the leader. Your brother's the high priest. Your sister's in charge of the woman. I mean, something is just not right here. I don't think it's sanctioned by God at all. I think it's you guys and you're taking care of yourselves. And he tries to make Moses look foolish. So he came up with these very clever ideas and he challenges Moses in public, these questions he has. So one of the questions he says to Moshe, what happens if you have a house full of Torahs? Let's say you have an obsession, you're a collector. You still need a mezuzah on your door. Why? Because in the Torah itself is written the portions of the Shema. So why would you need a mezuzah in your doorpost? And Moshe says, absolutely, you still need a mezuzah. And the people laugh at him. They scoff at him. Then he asks him a second question. You know, there's a special blue thread that they used to put in the tzitzit called techelet. The blue dye came from a mollusk, as a fish or a mollusk. And so he said, what if your entire garment is made from that dye? Do you still need the fringes? Because it says in the third paragraph of the Shema, so if you got techelet within the whole garment to begin with, it should reason you don't need the fringes. And Moses said, of course you need the fringes. So he tries to mock Moses, and Moses has had enough of him. So he said, look, we'll do this a very simple way. We're going to have, you heard about dueling pianos? We have dueling sacrifices. You and your 250 people that are challenging my leadership, you're going to bring a sacrifice, and I'll bring a sacrifice. And we'll see who God responds to. And we'll know who's the rightful leaders. If God responds to you, I'll step down from my leadership immediately, and you'll be the chosen and anointed one. Now, Moshe prays to God that these are people evil to the core, and they need to be dealt with. So those that try to bring the sacrifice, the spices, were killed immediately. God zapped them, so to speak. The rest of them, the entire ground opened up and swallowed all 250 of them. And there is a sage in the Talmud that maintains that he knew exactly the area where it happened. And if you put your ear to the ground, you could hear them saying, Moshe emet, v'Torah emet. Moses is legitimate, is truthful, and so is his Torah. But this is a story where Korach tried to challenge Moses based upon leadership. There's a story told of one of the Lubavitch rabbis. A man came on behalf of his sister, and the Lubavitch rabbi, you know, the Rebbe, where he was in 770 in New York. He was the last one. And you know, there was 7 of them. They all came from a city called Lubavitch, and generationally, this one was the last one because he didn't have any children, so no one took over the leadership. So somebody came over to him to get a blessing, and he says, you know, I want a blessing, not really for me, but for my sister. Her and her husband have been trying to get pregnant for some time already, and nothing is going. Nothing's happening. They've gone to specialists. They've tried anything and everything. The rabbi, without blinking an eyelid, said she needs to put mezuzah on every room in her house. So the brother does what the rabbi tells him. He's a good brother. He goes to the Judaica store. On the way, he calls his sisters. Tell me exactly how many bedrooms you have. And he lays out all the money, and he buys a mezuzah with the case and the cloth, right? That's a requirement. And fix it to every single door in the house. Within 1 year, she has a first child. 2 years later, she has a second child. And blessings are galore in the family. Then 9/11 happens. Now, 9/11 happens. Everybody saw the videos. I'm sure if I were to go around, I'm not going to do it tonight, but everybody knows exactly where you were when you heard it. Because I know I was doing high holiday rehearsal in room 15. And I heard people are tumult in the hallway. I went to the youth lounge and I was watching it on the TV there. But the buildings are burning and starting to collapse and all debris. And a firefighter is on call He's on duty. And he comes across a guy that got hit by debris. And he looks at this guy and he recognizes him. His children are in the same school as a firefighter's children. They go to the same school. Obviously, they both were Jewish. And he pulls the guy out just before more debris falls and hurts them. It turns out to be that the firefighter, the individual who was saved, was the father of this miracle child. The same child that was born by the blessing of the Rebbe. The firefighter recognized him, and obviously you go first where you recognize, even though I'm sure by morally you go wherever you can save, but it happened to be that they were put in the same place. And that miracle child came through, and once again, we have another example of the power of a mezuzah. Now, in terms of when the scribe is writing, he's got quilt, he's got ink, and he's got the parchment. He's not allowed to have any strange thoughts. He's got to really be focused 100% on what you're doing, what he's doing. Same thing by mezuzah, same thing by
Torah.
No, there is a concept called Meshana Makom, Meshana Mazos. If somebody has a bad run and is not successful, maybe a change of venue. We use that all the time. Change of location, change of venue, change of job, changes somebody's mazel. When we say mazel tov to somebody, we don't mean congratulations. That's a misnomer. When you say mazel tov to somebody, you should say you should only have good fortune.
Yeah.
So when somebody is not having good fortune, for example, God forbid somebody is dying in a hospital, one of the things that the rabbi is allowed to do by Jewish law, we add him another name. And we take a name that either deals with healing or life. So if it's a man, you give him like a name Chaim, which means life, or female Chaya, or Raphael, which means to heal. And if they should survive, then they keep the names for the rest of their lives. And I just remembered something because tonight is my great-grandfather's yard site. I wanted to dedicate, his name was Aaron, I'm named after him. And he had an extra name because he got sick. So his second name was Ezriel, which means with the help of God. So his name is Aaron ben Yaakov Yeshua. And I should be remiss, I got so excited about the class, I wanted to also dedicate it to Len Kamener, who was on last week's class, and a blessed memory, a really good man. And if you have a chance to really watch the eulogy today, it's really worthwhile to see the beautiful things that his son said about him. And it's true. Anyone that knows Len will be vouch 100%. So I want to dedicate the class proactively. Retroactively, with 40 minutes in and the remainder of the class to my great-grandfather and to Len. Now, the kosher animal has to be obviously done on parchment. You use a goose feather, not any feather, but a goose feather. You can use a calligraphy pen. You can't use any of these things. It has to be specifically this. And it's really a labor-intensive job. So I started to say is that you can change a person's fortune by when you catch some mistakes in the words, that a person's fortune will change.
Do you have to start over if you make a mistake, like you do with other things?
It depends on the nature of the mistake, but what you absolutely cannot do is write it out of order.
Yeah.
So let's say you start with the second paragraph first, and then you try to come back to the first. Let's say you didn't fill in. So I was going to tell you there's such an interesting thing on the mezuzah. For those of you that have been up to the Torah, you'll see that there's crowns in the Torah. The Hebrew word for these crowns, they're not just for decorative. There's like crowns, certain letters have 3 of them on one letter. So the 3 categories that have a crown on. One of them has none at all, they're just a generalized letter with no crown. Another one is there's about 7 or 8 letters. I can tell you what they are. Shin, Ayin, Tab, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Tzadik. Those always have 3. And then there's some single ones, which are the Bet, Dalet, Kuf, Chet, Yud, Hey. Each one of those have to be written into the Torah and have to be written into mezuzah. So I was watching a class in preparation for tonight. And there used to be some people that would outsource. Some would just write the text of the mezuzah and then give it to another person to put the crowns on. And this rabbi, this sofer, was vehemently against it. He said it has to be the same person. It's kind of weird that one person is doing it now like a hybrid, two separate people. Now, what are these crowns about? So the rabbis tell us there's something that Moshe received at Sinai, and each one of them have all kind of laws that we can derive from. We don't even know all of them. And some of these laws won't be revealed until the coming of Messiah. So we're told that Moses went up to heaven, and when he was in heaven, he saw God filling in the crowns. Whatever that means, okay? God was doing it himself. And Moshe said, what is this? So explain to him, these are these crowns that go in specific letters. He said, what's the purpose? He said, well, all kind of learnings are going to come out of these wonderful ideas, are going to come out of it. And I'm doing it specifically for one rabbi in the future. This rabbi happens to be Rabbi Akiva. The reason I got my scruff going tonight, because he lost 24,000 students in this time period, the same rabbi. So Moshe was really amazed by this, and he asked for God for something extraordinary. He said, I'd like to see this rabbi. Well, this is futuristically, generations down. God can do anything, according to the commentary. God allows Rabbi Akiva Moses to sit in his classroom. He's 18 rows deep. It was by the closer you were to the teacher, was a merit-based. The more you knew, the closer you were to the front. The less you knew, obviously. So Moshe is sitting in the back row and he can't understand a word. He doesn't know what this guy's talking about. But at the very end, he says, and these are laws based upon the oral law given to Moshe. So Moshe felt good about it in the end. But these are special crowns that have to be added and put in the right letters specifically, because if they're not, they can also make a mezuzah, obviously, to the point where it's not kosher.
I have a question, Cantor.
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about the what you write with,
The quill pen, yeah.
the quill, but what about the ink? Does it have
The
to
ink
be-
is a very special ink also, and you can ask Rabbi Hell because he does the gets,
Yeah.
and I use a similar ink. There's a whole chemical base of what you use within the inks, and it has to be very specific to what you're using for that. It cannot come from an animal that's not kosher.
Well, I thought it's from fruit and vegetables, like I thought it's from like blueberries and onion peel and all kind of.
I think there's a little bit more involved to some of those. I think there's some actual chemicals outside of natural growth products, but it's a very special ink that has to be used, and you have to go to a sulfur. You can't rely on anybody else. Now, there is an opinion that says when you go get them checked, it's not a bad idea to get another fresh set of eyes on them. Like we go what we call a second opinion. Because sometimes one person sees something that another doesn't. So some say to go to a different sulfur instead of your primary one, just to get an idea. Now, the law in the Torah is if you have a city that is known for idol worship, it's supposed to be brought down to the ground. There's one exception, and that is if there's one door that has a mezuzah, you don't destroy the city. That's how much merit the mezuzah has. You can destroy the people, but not the physicality of the actual city itself. Bring it down to the ground.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How long does it take for a sofa to actually knock out a mezuzah?
You know, there's all different ways to do it. I know some sofrim that every time, by the way, a plug for next week is all gonna be about water.
Water?
Bodies of water, rivers, seas, drinking water, it's all gonna be water-based next week. So why do I mention that? Because every time a sofer comes to use God's name,
Yeah.
they go to the mikvah. Some take a break and they go immerse in the mikvah and they come back again. So depending on his time frame, let's say he starts writing the first paragraph and somebody comes and says, You know, we've got a Torah, we only have one. So you may prioritize taking a break from writing the mezuzah, but it shouldn't take exceptionally long because you basically got 2 paragraphs, unlike a Torah.
But it's usually small lettering.
Well, it depends on the size of the kid.
Yeah, so depending on the size of the parchment, as I said, the smaller the parchment, you really got to be concerned with, because to get these little ones that you see. Now, I wanted to digress to a different thing. So we talk about mezuzahs being protections. And Bruce has told me, because I got to play with some good golf with my friend on Wednesday. And he told me, I asked him, do you sell mezuzah necklaces? He said, yes, we have them. Now, are you allowed to actually wear a real mezuzah as a necklace?
No.
No.
No, absolutely not. Okay?
So
Yes.
in Israel, they have a mezuzah for your car.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to tell you, that was my next thing. Everything, as we know, has become commercialized.
Yeah.
I don't have to say anything more than you start to see Christmas decorations in September, you know, so. And Pesach, you see matzah around January already. And so everything is an opportunity to have an opportunity. So you have people with a mezuzah for the car. You don't need a mezuzah on your car unless it's a recreational vehicle. If it's one of those big ones that you live in, you must have a mezuzah. But if it's a standardized car, it's somebody that maybe likes it or feels good about doing it, or somebody sold them a bill of goods,
Somebody's sister gave you one.
or somebody's sister gave you.
If you have a second home, like a cottage,
Okay.
but you only go on the weekends, you're not up there for weeks and weeks and weeks. Do you still put a mezuzah on the doors?
That's a really good question.
Technically, no.
That's a really good question, because I'll get back to you then, because I think the 30 days have to be consecutive.
Right, that's what I wondered.
Right, so if the 30 days aren't consecutive. So here's an interesting case. I want to show you how the rabbis come to some of their conclusions. So there's a story told, and this is actually true. So Pesach night, kids are very excited. There's an afikomen, and the father hides it when he's supposed to. And the kids are all jacked up and they get super excited because they know they get really good gifts. They all rush at the same time, going through the same doorway, the narrow doorway, and somebody knocks off the mezuzah. Comes right out of the casing, falls on the floor. So the man didn't know what to do. On one hand, you know, there's a concept on Shabbat and festivals called muksa. Muksa means you're not supposed to touch something that's unrelated to the holiday. So one hand cannot touch it, but his 10-year-old son made a decision for him. He puts it right in his hand. Puts it in his hand, and now he's made a decision for dad. Now what's he supposed to do? Are you allowed to put it back on the doorpost?
No.
So he puts it down on the dining room table and he continues with the Seder. So the guy was being facetious, is telling the story. So the first question is, you're allowed to touch it. He says, now comes the 6th question, because you already had the 4 from the 4 questions at the Seder. And the 6th question is, are you allowed to be in a room where there's no mezuzah hanging on the door? Because what it would mean technically is you got to stop the Seder, pick up all the plates, and move the guests out. So there's a lot of technicalities involved in this question. They continued with the Seder, needless to say. But he looked up the answer. So hypothetically speaking, this happens on Shabbat. So the question becomes, A, is the casing still on the wall? By the way, when you put a mezuzah on, you either use 2-way tape or nails to fix it. It's supposed to be firmly locked in.
Yeah.
Okay, firmly locked in on the wall. So the question becomes, if you put it flimsily in, does it even count? If you just kind of just pop it in and it's like flimsy. So if the case is still there, the question becomes now, can you take it and put it back on? So now you start to deal with all these other prohibitions. I just want to show you how the rabbis' minds work. In rabbinic law, which you'll find very refreshing, you cannot just say, because I said so. You got to bring a proof. And somebody can say, well, it's like the lawyers. You know, you bring a case, somebody cites a case, and another lawyer says you're misinterpreting the case. That means something entirely different, and this is what it means. So if you were to take the mezuzah and put it back in, there's such a thing called bone there, which is building. So you're changing the status of what the mezuzah is now to what it was before. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbat. They go back and forth in this whole discussion. The end of the day, the case is, as long as the case is on. Now, if you have to start fiddling with nails, you run into a problem because you can't make the hole bigger. So if you're able to just very simply, it's one of those pop cases on, I have a few of them at home when my pops off, and just put it in and pop it back on, that's much more standardized. And you have to make another blessing. Your original blessing that you made whenever you first affixed this mezuzah doesn't cover you anymore. So now I thought that was a really an amazing story. Now,
In connection to that, let's say you remodel the house, you remodel,
yeah,
and you bring a painter and all that, and they have to remove the mezuzah to paint the doorpost. What's the ruling about that? When you remodel,
if he has to paint the doorpost,
No, if you have.
painting and all that.
that's up to you. What's important, what's important is that you put a mezuzah up, however you want to do it.
But when you, after you paint, you have to say.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Or you can paint around it. You don't have to take it off.
If you want to take it off, you're allowed.
Yeah, of course. But I would put it back as soon as possible. I don't have to tell you about help these days, or they tell you they're coming and they're not there for another 4 weeks. So you don't want to pull it off and you have a month without a mezuzah on your door. Yeah,
Let's say somebody comes to check your mezuzah
yeah.
and one letter has started to flake off. Can it be repaired?
Yes, depending on the nature of the letter, I don't know all the laws to science, but most of the time they can do a repair.
Joel's got a question. When they put it back after the painting, they have to do a new blessing.
That's what
Yeah.
Cantor, I was told, and I don't know if it's true, that if you sell your home and the person.
Yeah,
buying your
I'm coming
home-
to that right now.
Oh, okay, then I'll be quiet.
Yeah.
Very painful, what Rochelle's talking about is you're moving homes. You've gone by the letter of the law, you have 20 mezuzahs on your house, and the new owners are Jewish. By letter of the law, you have to leave your mezuzahs behind. Now, you can come to an arrangement with them, and if they're a mensch, I would like to think the totality of the house, for the house and what you're spending on it, and would realize there's some sentimental value, that either they would reimburse you to some extent or say to you, you know what, we've got our own mezuzahs. But by the letter of the law, if it is a Jewish tenant, yeah, you have to leave the mezuzahs, but the hope is you're dealing with a mensch. And the person would say, look, this is my grandfather's mezuzah, or I've got one from my uncle, whoever the case is. Yes, but that is not such a pleasant. I just want to end with one last story. There was a man that started off with an eye infection and started to slowly lose his vision in one of his eyes. And had no idea, went to an ophthalmologist, and then they started to take some x-rays. And they found out that he had a massive blood clot behind his eye. And surgery was all set up. This is right before the 17th of Tammuz, the fast day. And he asked some of his friends, well, handle your medical side of things, but we do have a formula, which is an age-old formula, check your mezuzah. They go into the mezuzah, and there's a word einecha. Einecha is in the mezuzah, it's missing a yud. Just missed it. So basically, the sofer tells him it's missing the yud, and he buys a new mezuzah. Unbelievably, the next day, the guy wakes up, can see perfectly. He goes back to his doctor, and no explanation given. Doctor's like shocked, beyond shocked as to what he can or what he cannot do. So what I want to leave off with you tonight, and there's so much more I can say, I mean, I'm over-prepared for the class, but I think it's such an easy thing to do. in terms of, and I will make a commitment, I'll say on public record, if anyone gets a mezuzah, I'll come and fix it with you on your doors. Those that live in Ohio, sorry. I'm not coming to Maryland, sorry, but
We moved to Ohio.
yeah, but it's really, it's such an easy mitzvah to do, and it has such great benefits to put a mezuzah on your doorpost. And understand it's a undertaking, a financial undertaking, they're varying prices. I would say to you this, the casing, many people get caught up with the casing too often. It's like a good wine. It says in the Pirkei Avot, Artis Takaba Kankan, Elamashi Batocha. Don't look at the barrel. Don't look at the outer barrel. You see an outer barrel, be more concerned with the wine is inside. The mitzvah is actually the cloth. You don't have to spend all kind of, unless you like it, because it can be part of your artwork. Some people really love beautiful cases.
Wait, excuse me, I thought you were.
You sell beautiful artwork also. I'm helping you under any case, but the point is, it's such an easy thing to do, and they're very easily accessible. You can start off with one room at a time, and front door, work your way through your house, but it's really the benefits, and I'm gonna tell you honestly, I saw testimonial after testimonial of documented stories where people had issues with a mezuzah or they had the mezuzah, and now I'm not gonna tell you it's gonna bring down inflation or gonna end all the wars tomorrow, but in your private dwelling, it's been known that it's a protection and very easy to do, and I highly, highly recommend it. If you have one, add another. If you have another, add another. Go through your house, and as I said, if you want any help, I'll come, I'll make the blessing with you. You got somebody that's got from a reputable dealer from New York that sells mezuzahs. But there are numerous places where you could get mezuzahs, but it's so worthwhile to do. And the merits are so wonderful in having mezuzahs that you will truly see the benefit. Yeah.
I have a question. There was a time where the Chatan v'Kala, when they broke the
The glass.
glass, they used to keep the glass amassed and make mezuzahs for me and put. Yeah, is that kosher?
Well, the casing can be made from anything.
Okay.
Once again, bear in mind, the casing is more aesthetic than anything. That's a nice memory because you're sharing your first home together. So it's a beautiful idea to take the broken glass under the chuppah, and you go to someone like Zahava, who's very talented and will make a mezuzah case for you or help you put one together, or Mr. Bruce will help design one. But the point is, it's a beautiful idea because you're coming together as one. The mezuzah itself represents one. Talks about be'ahavta. What is be'ahavta? Ahava, numerical value, and echad. The word echad have the same numerical value of 13. When you have true love, you have one. They become one. When we treat God as one, and God is the center focus of our entire world, so the idea is a beautiful idea. But more importantly than the casing is actual cloth.
The cloth inside.
Yes, yeah, the cloth inside, and to take good care of it. And all of you should, on that note, have a wonderful week with much blessings. I want you to tell me next week, we got a mezuzah. I'll be very happy that we did something. Next week, as I said, we will be speaking about, we're going to transition to classes in nature and how God uses nature sometimes to manipulate outcomes. But also different stories about rivers and seas and water. I think we'll find some interesting things. Erev Tov, everyone.